Senate Resolution 70 by Senator Atkins relative to Transgender Day of Visibility.
Senator Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise today to present SR 70, which celebrates Transgender Week of Visibility in the Capitol and proclaiming March 31st as Transgender Day of Visibility. Commemorated each year, the International Transgender Day of Visibility encompasses an expansive community of people who identify as two-spirit, transgender, gender nonconforming or non-binary, or intersex. If you're keeping track of the initials, that would be 2STGNIC. And while our LGBTQ+ caucus and our community, as well as our allies, honor the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is a painful day where we memorialize our trans siblings we've lost due to trans hate and gender violence, it's critically important that we also commemorate Transgender Day of Visibility to celebrate our 2STGNIC siblings with joy, with hope, and with support. The California Legislative LGBTQ Caucus reaffirms its unwavering support to our two-spirit, transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and intersex siblings. Our community is united in our pursuit for equity and equality for all people. Our caucus is proud to highlight the representation of the TGI community in elected offices nationwide, with more than 98 officials that we know of, including 9 in California, such as one of my own supervisors in San Diego County, Tara Lawson-Remer. And of course, we've all heard and seen the national work of Lisa Middleton, who serves on the Palm Springs City Council. Now more than ever, it's critically important that we celebrate during this week and further affirm our support for our trans siblings and their right to live visibly, openly, authentically, and unapologetically. So, colleagues, thank you. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote on SR 70, reaffirming our support for our community members.
Thank you, Senator Atkins. I see microphones up from Senator Padilla and Wiener. Senator Padilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I rise today on behalf of the Latino Caucus in support of SR 70 to celebrate our transgender siblings and Transgender Day and Week of Visibility. Celebrations like this give us an opportunity to uplift the voices and the stories of peoples in our communities working to make this state more equitable for all. Stories of people like Bambi Salcedo, an activist known for her passionate advocacy as the CEO of the Trans-Latin Coalition, which has worked to address the issues of the transgender Latina community throughout the nation. Or the story of Adela Vasquez, a Cuban transgender HIV/AIDS activist. Her work supporting trans women battling AIDS has been instrumental in San Francisco since the early 1980s. There are so many stories of community and progress that happen every day in the state, stories of our neighbors and family working to make a better life for themselves and their loved ones. But while we celebrate, we cannot ignore the sad and alarming rise of open aggression and bigotry directed at the LGBTQ community throughout our country, especially towards trans children. Every day in this country, trans rights are under attack as extremists try to slander, shame, and even physically attack trans individuals for simply existing. This year alone, over 400 pieces of anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ legislation have been introduced in city halls and state houses, and even in our nation's capital. There are those that seek to strip members of the community of their dignity, indeed their humanity, one right at a time. Harvey Milk said that when the LGBTQ community stays in the shadow, we perpetuate our invisibility. And he was right, which is why recognitions and acknowledgements are visible and important and vital. Trans Day and Week of Visibility are a way for us to demonstrate our support in our trans communities because they deserve happiness, safety, and the ability to live openly as their true and authentic selves. We must dedicate ourselves, frankly, colleagues, to the work of educating and fostering understanding. We have to lift up the beating hearts of every human being as precious and build more direct human conditions and connections. It remains a basic human trait. We fear what we don't understand, and fear often devolves into hatred. It is our duty to help others see the humanity in one another. Colleagues, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Next, I want to recognize Senator Weiner, followed by Senator Bradford. Senator Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise today as co-chair of the Legislative Jewish Caucus, as a gay man, and as a staunch supporter of our trans community in support of SR 70. At a time when the trans community is under attack across the country, it's of utmost importance that we recognize and reaffirm that trans people are loved, seen, and entitled to the same decency and respect as anyone else. We must take action to protect our trans siblings and make clear that we will not abandon them. Within the Jewish tradition, there's a rich history of transgender recognition. Jewish legalistic tradition recognizes 6 genders and the fluidity among them. Talmudic and Kabbalistic study identify important figures within our faith as living their lives in ways that might be considered trans or non-binary in modern terms. Even as we celebrate this community, it's important to recognize that trans people, particularly trans women of color, are more likely to experience violence. That violence must be recognized and called out so that we don't lose any more of our trans siblings. Last year was the deadliest year ever on record for the trans community, something I hope I never need to say again. And we must condemn the way that trans kids are cruelly, viciously, and cynically used to score political points. These attacks have real consequences. When treatment is denied, lives are lost. 81% of trans individuals have considered and 42% have attempted suicide. That number is 56% among trans youth, almost 630% of the rate among the entire youth population in terms of attempting suicide. 56% of trans adults have engaged in non-suicidal self-injury in their lifetime. Next Benedict is just the latest instance in which we have seen vile rhetoric and bullying and intimidation against the trans community turn into real-life harm. Children are losing their lives because of the hate preached against them. Let's be clear that playing political games with people's lives is despicable and must never be the norm in American politics. Whether it's bad faith bathroom bills or those seeking to discriminate, our voices must be clear. There is no place for this disgusting and deadly hatred in our community. These groups and individuals who are engaging in this deadly form of politics towards trans people, they're not actually interested in reality. The facts that they claim are often not true and are simply cover for bigotry. They're weaponizing hate and discomfort to engage in a mythological culture war that distracts from the true crimes and violence actually being committed against trans people in our society. They treat trans people as if they're not full human beings, as if they're just making it up, as if they're just trying to scam their way into a space where they, according to these folks, shouldn't be. Is it any wonder that the trans community struggles when day in and day out they have to listen to that kind of vile, dehumanizing rhetoric? The Jewish community, according to surveys, has been more accepting of trans people and gender diverse people than any other group. I'm proud of our trans community, I'm proud of our Jewish community, and I am proud to vote aye on SR 70.
Thank you, Senator Weiner. Senator Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Vice Chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, I support SR 70, recognizing March 31st, 2024 as Transgender Day of Visibility and this week as Transgender Week of Visibility. It is important to acknowledge that members of this transgender community have overcome many obstacles and challenges to build a place for themselves. These obstacles include mental and physical harassment, discrimination, and attacks on their very identity. Black, transgender, and non-binary youth in particular experience a unique set of challenges because of the intersection between their race and their gender identity. 77% of Black, transgender, and non-binary youth suffer discrimination based on their gender identity. 40% of them have been physically threatened or harmed because of their gender identity. These numbers show that we must all do what we must all do to make our state and our country a more welcoming and accepting place. We can continue to look at the examples set by people like Marsha P. Johnson, who was a central figure of the Stonewall Uprising, and Miss Major Griffin Gracie, who led to San Francisco-based transgender, variant, and intersex justice project to advocate for incarcerated trans women. I would like to thank our President Pro Tem Emeritus Atkins for bringing this measure forward, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Bradford. I have a microphone up from Senator Laird, followed by Senator Skinner. Senator Laird.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. There was a time early in my own career where I was one of the few out elected officials. If you can believe it, I had many constituents that thought I was the only gay person they knew. It's because there were lots there, but that wasn't true. And they weren't out to them. And it took this changing of people realizing who was around them and what the community was to sort of get what the real LGBT community was and to get the struggles that actually were going on that was the reason that they didn't think there were many other people around them. And as we advance to discussing this resolution and the subject of trans people, it is very similar. It is very similar in that people do not understand who's around them, but I had this experience that was, all of us have had to understand and learn. I am among the older members here. For the first 20 or 30 years of my life, it never occurred to me once I had mentally programmed somebody's gender that I had to adjust in how I addressed them. And I have someone who was a staff member in the assembly when I was an assembly member that transitioned, that is now an elected official in Santa Cruz County. And I am mortified to confess that for the first year I would slip periodically and call him she until I totally reprogrammed in a way that I wasn't used to having to do. And that is true for families. And there's somebody in my community that is a member of the LGBT community that in her own right was an incredible trailblazer, a leader ascended to a position that not many women had ever ascended to in the law enforcement ranks. And she and her partner have a few kids. And this one kid's doing really well in school and then gets, for 2 or 3 years, is like really crashing. And they go to counseling and they understand that this is the issue. And that kid gradually starts to adjust to who they think they are, and they are succeeding in school. They are doing really well. And it was interesting because the parents had to make the adjustment just as much as the kid had to make the adjustment. And so I talk about these because then we have the laws that were referred to, and it's sort of at a very high level politicizing this situation and trying to force people into whether it's bathrooms or bedrooms or families, when it's individuals struggling to sort of do what is right for them, it is families struggling to do what's right for the individual, and it's up to us in the awareness and recognition to make sure we allow for that to happen in a good, positive, constructive way. And I think this resolution is part of that discussion, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Laird. Senator Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I rise as the chair of the Women's Caucus in support of SR 70, and I greatly appreciate the very eloquent comments by our colleagues that I probably would not be able to articulate as well, but I wanted to give thanks to the text of the resolution in that it cites these historical real things within our cultural history and within the canons of our Western civilization. When you look at the Greek and Roman and the other citations that are made in SR 70, and of course to our colleague from San Francisco's reference to the tradition, the Jewish tradition in the Torah and the other studies, that the political fixation now denies the fact that this has been a reality within our human culture from day one and has been by most cultures accepted. And it has been much more recently where we have tried to categorize people in such a way that we then mistreat them, discriminate against them, and other horrible consequences where they feel that they can have no feelings of self-worth and self-confidence, which is the absolute worst thing to do to any person. So as a Women's Caucus chair, I stand in great thanks that this is being brought before us. And I also am very proud to represent a district that has really been at the forefront of many of these issues. We were the first area that I am aware of to have elected an openly trans person when in 2010 we elected Vicki Kolakowski as a judge. And we also have had, our trans community has held a public vigil to read the names out loud of every trans person that died in that year, and they have been holding that public vigil since earlier than 2008. So I am so proud to represent a district like that, and I'm also proud that culturally now, when we look at whether it's our, and there's some stereotypes, but whether we look at TV shows, movies and such like that, that there in entertainment, there is much more acceptance of trans people and projection of trans people. Again, with unfortunately some stereotypes in certain cases, but much more a reflection of what we should all be welcoming and engaged in rather than the politicalization and the demeaning that we see too often, and we see so many other states in engaging in the laws that they've passed. So again, I thank the author for bringing this forward, and I urge an aye vote on SR 70.
Thank you, Senator Skinner. I want to now recognize Senator Jones.
Mr. President, members, I just wanted to rise briefly and explain why I'll be voting no on SR 70. And while I know this is a very personal decision by each one of all 40 of us here on the Senate floor, and there's many things in this resolution that are supportable. And I also want to agree with our colleagues that have raised the concern of the culture war and the hate-filled speech and treatment that our trans community is experiencing across the United States. And certainly, I do not support any of those words and or actions that are meant in a hateful, demeaning, or any way such as that. The challenge I have is I have 3 children. I have 2 boys and a girl. My girl is in the middle. All 3 of them have played collegiate level volleyball. My boys are 6'4". My daughter is 5'4". Most female college volleyball players are 6 foot tall or taller. Most male college volleyball players are 6'7" or taller. And when we are seeing the impacts on female sports around this country, both at the high school level and the college level, the brief reference to sports in the resolution is what is causing me to vote no today, and appreciate the ability to be able to share those sentiments today. But I think we've got to come to a place where we're protecting women in women's sports and allow women to accomplish every dream that they have set out since they were little girls to compete at those levels and be able to win and win the prize that they've worked for. Thank you very much.
Senator Min.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Vice Chair of the API Legislative Caucus, I want to thank my colleague from San Diego for bringing this forward. This is such an important bill. The message it sends is so important. We obviously live in a time when there is just rampant hate of all kinds. My community has seen a spike in anti-Asian hate. It has left many members of my community feeling vulnerable, scared. We've seen a rise in anti-black hate, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. But we know that anti-trans hate is the most vitriolic, the most violent, and the most pervasive in our society. And we need to stand together. And so on behalf of the API Legislative Caucus, I want to say to the trans community out there, we see you, we recognize your struggles, we stand with you because we are better and stronger when we stand together against hate. And yes, even in California, we see too much hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Min. Senator Grove.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too respectfully rise in opposition of SR 70. I'd like to echo some of my colleagues' comments that were said. You know, there's no room for hate. There's no room for the persecution of individuals who are transgender or Jewish or white or black or Asian. There's no room for that in the state of California. And I think that, you know, takes me back to a little song when I was in Bible school. You know, it's like red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. And when you think about just treating people with decency and respect, but I do think that the language in the resolution does take it further than it did last year when you look at transgenderism. And you have to think about our biological girls that are competing against biological males. They're also having to dress in dressing rooms with biological males. You get our biological females that are in grade school and high school are getting hurt. Because let's just face it, ladies, I mean, we're really good at what we do, but biological males are just a lot of times more stronger than us, and especially in an adolescent world. Like I said, I don't think there's any room for hate. I don't think there's any room for accusations or fear and all of those things. I think there should be a safe space, but for transgender individuals who are choosing that or in some cases, by my colleagues' definitions, designed by that. But I just want to say that, you know, we have to also create a safe space for our biological females that are struggling in all of our districts. And that's evident with the poll that just came out that 64% of California voters believe that biological males should not play sports with biological females, because some of our girls are being brutally hurt in these situations because it's just a fact that males are obviously stronger than females. And so just with that in the resolution, respectfully ask for a no vote.
Members, any further discussion or debate? For the second time, Senator Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't planning, obviously, to speak a second time, but some comments were made that I think need a response, particularly about transgender kids who simply want to play sports, something that kids want to do, and are being told by politicians, no, you're not allowed to play sports. We need to be very clear that the narrative that's being painted around trans kids playing sports, as if it's a bunch of LeBrons going to the local high school to play the high school kids. That's what they paint it as. And we know that that is not what is actually happening in the real world. And so many of these trans kids may not even be very good at sports, just like, you know, many of us may have been not very good at particular sports that we wanted to play. And they're not dominating. And there are plenty of examples of trans kids who compete and don't do well and finish in 8th or 10th or 12th place. That doesn't make the press. That doesn't get blasted out on social media. There was one famous situation, a swimmer from Kentucky who complained that a trans woman tied her, and because of a tiebreaker, came in ahead of her. what she neglects to mention is that they tied for 6th place because 5 cisgender women finished ahead of the trans woman who was swimming, and that became a cause célèbre as some sort of argument against trans participation in sports. There are these kids in general, and particularly trans kids, they just want to live their lives. And some trans kid in the Midwest who just wants to run cross country and doesn't want to have people have to examine their genitalia because that's something that they're trying to require. Imagine some like 13-year-old who just wants to run cross country and now has to submit to some humiliating physical examination because politicians have decided that that's what's necessary. Do you wonder why these kids are in such a bad place? The constant attacks, and we know, yes, the polling shows, because we know how it works, that after the right wing lost the battle on marriage equality, that was no longer a winning issue. They did focus groups and evaluation and decided, what's the next group that we can target? It was trans kids, and we know from the polling that trans kids in sports, that can be a strong issue for the hard right. So be it. So be it. We have to do what the right thing is, which is making sure that these kids are able to be who they are, live their lives, play whatever sports they want to play, and just leave them alone.
Senator Ciarto.
Thank you. Just a brief follow-up to that. We were not talking about intramural sports when we were talking about this issue. And that's why it's a difficult issue. We're talking about kids that are competing for scholarships, the opportunity to go to college and have that paid for. And intramural sports have been around forever. I played intramural sports because I'm one of those that was a little small to be playing on the football team. And I know the good senator from Gardena would probably find that surprising. But anyway, when you're talking about that, we're talking about kids that are in high school or college playing competitively. And that competitiveness is what's going to get them into college. And if they are not allowed to play, my daughter played tennis. If she was playing against a biological male, she would not have played tennis. And she got so much from just being on one of the best tennis teams in the state. This is not an attack on not allowing trans kids or any other kids to play with people of the opposite sex. We've been doing that forever. It's about competitive sports. That's what it's about. We wish no harm to anybody. The folks that are concerned about this issue with our females in sports and males in sports. The women fought so hard to get the rights to Title IX, to be able to compete and make money like the guys are doing. They finally got there. And now we have this issue that is challenging some of that. And we have to come to grips with that. And if we're going to put a controversial issue like that into a great resolution otherwise, that it makes it non-supportable, then maybe we should be looking at that one thing and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe this shouldn't be in here. So I will be joining my colleagues in voting no on behalf of all the young ladies that are competing like heck to excel in sports. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Eggman.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and members. I rise as the chair of the LGBTQ caucus. We spent a lot of time talking about what this resolution is not. I want to remind everybody this is the day of trans visibility. What we're saying to our trans brothers and sisters, we see you, you belong here, we welcome you here, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
All right, all debate having ceased. Senator Atkins, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, thank you. Clearly, discussion will continue on a number of these issues in society, which is even more the reason we need to stand in support of visibility and the right to be who we are. I would point out, gosh, I was a kid when Billie Jean King actually won that tennis match that has resonated for decades still. And she was honored by the Women's Caucus, or the Gay Caucus, maybe both caucuses, I can't remember at this point. And let's talk about Caitlin Clark. And then I'm going to get off the sports analogies, because I think that as we see society change, we rise to the occasion in different ways. And we become the very best that we can, whoever we are, in whatever way we do what we enjoy doing in life, and that includes sports. But I wanted to, like my colleague from Stockton, bring it back to really the point of the broader resolution is about support and visibility for a community that has made great strides over these last several decades. And yet right now, because of those strides and the ability to have some equality and some success in gaining rights, there is a backlash, which is why we end up having the Day of Remembrance, where we pay tribute to those who've died. And typically, as my colleague from Gardena says, they're typically people of color that are more targeted. You know, you've heard me say on the floor, you know, I grew up in Southwest Virginia in a very conservative community, a very church-going community. My mom was a part of that. And when I was a kid and at age 17 realized that I was a little bit different, there were no role models around me. But I was thinking about this resolution last night and standing on the floor and anticipating this dialogue. And it occurred to me I was wrong. I actually did have an example that I ran into one day. My sister and I, when we were 10, 11 years old, used to pass her on the street in our neighborhood and community. She would be going home from the night shift at work. And I say she because that's how she presented. And, you know, at that time, my sister and I finally realized there was something a little different about her. And today, what I would say and what we realized is that she was likely transgender 50 years ago. What courage that must have taken. And it bore out, it was true. I remember talking to my mother, and my mother, who will always be the role model of acceptance and kindness, next to Dolly Parton. My mother, who said to me in her, I mean, she was Pentecostal holiness till the day she left us. And she said to my sister and I, you be kind. She is different. And God loves all of his children. And I never forgot that, because for me, it really set the tone in my life. And so when I came out to my mother, the acceptance was there. She really didn't understand, much like my colleague from Santa Cruz was explaining what we've had to learn over the last 20, 30, 40 years, how language and culture change, and how we have to maybe recognize and adjust that we're a little behind occasionally. My mother never was, not in the area of kindness, not in the area of acceptance. And so today, you know, when I stand up, I have had to learn so much in the last couple of decades. But I stand here strongly supportive of this resolution and the fact that we should be supporting verbally to counter all that's going on across this country for those who have been brave enough to tell us who they are and to make those transitions despite everything against them. And so I urge you, I know dialogue will continue. I just hope in the way of how we educate each other, that's what we take away from this today, that many of us have a lot to learn, obviously, in every direction. And so I thank my colleagues for their conversation. I still respectfully ask for your support for SR 70 today.
Senator Atkins has closed the debate. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Alvarado Gil. Aye. Archuleta. Aye. Ashby. Aye. Atkins. Aye. Becker. Aye. Blakespear. Aye. Bradford. Aye. Caballero. Aye. Cortese. Aye. Daly. No. Dodd. Aye. Durazo. Aye. Eggman. Aye. Glazer.
Aye.
Aye. Gonzalez. Aye. Grove. No. Hurtado. Aye. Jones. Laird. Laird. Aye. Limon. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Menjivar. Aye. Min. Aye. Newman. Aye. Wen. No. Nilo. Ochoa Bog. Padilla. Aye. Portantino. Aye. Roth. Aye. Rubio. Aye. Sigarto. No. Skinner. Aye. Smallwood Cuevas. Aye. Stern. Aye. Umberg. Aye. Wahab. Aye. Wiener. Aye. Wilk.
Please call the absent members.
Jones. No. Nilo. Ochoa Bog. Wilk.
On a vote of 32 to 5, the resolution is adopted.